What's up, NFL fans? Welcome back to another episode of Four Down Territory. As always, I'm your host, Luke Easterling, alongside Doug Farrar, the czar of the X's and the O's, author of The Genius of Desperation, editor of Touchdown Wire. Do I need to keep going, Doug, here? What else you got? What else can I list off here, all your accolades?
I'm the sleep-deprived guy who just got back from Indianapolis, I can tell you that.
That's true. You are not alone in that category, though.
Ooh, boy. No, I'm not. I can tell you for sure. I saw some things, man. Ooh, I saw some things.
We always do. We always do, right? Hey, so let's start right there. Scouting Combine, it's officially over. We saw, again, up to 320 players, almost 320 players coming to Indy, Lucas Oil Stadium. We get 4 days of on-field drills. So much of what happens behind the scenes is actually more important than that, the interviews, the medicals, and all those types of things. But let's stick with what we saw on the field and talk about who impressed, who kind of disappointed. Obviously, we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. Who was the guy on offense who made himself the most money in your mind with what we saw this weekend in Indy?
Well, I think we should start by saying, and teams will tell you this, what happens at the Combine generally comprises about 10% of the evaluation process unless there's serious medical concerns arise, which happens at the Combine, because that's people come from medicals, or character issues come up, and obviously there's one big example of that. That story broke, by the way, 15 minutes before Jalen Carter was supposed to come to his podium for his press conference, so that was a circus. But at least that's the case for smart teams. Sometimes you'll get a guy who gets, overdrafted by 3 rounds because he does something amazing. But I just want to mention, you always want to go back to the tape. That's true for us. That's true for teams. That said, the event is important. And I'll go with not really a sleeper, but a guy who disappeared for the wrong reasons in 2022 is Ohio State receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba. He is a name because of a 2021 season in which he caught 95 passes for 1,606 yards and 9 touchdowns, but he was limited to just 3 games last season with a hamstring injury. Smith-Njigba didn't run the 40 at the Combine, but he participated in the vertical and broad jumps as well as the 3-cone drill and the 20-yard shuttle, and he posted high 90th percentile numbers in the last 2 events, like historically all-time great. He then hit the receiver drills. He looked smooth and practiced with everything, especially, obviously, when C.J. Stroud was throwing to him. I'm not sure if this and his 2021 tape makes him WR1. I'm still trying to figure that out between 3 guys, but it certainly erased any concerns about what he can do on the field. And, when you go back to that 2021 tape, man, he is an inside outside. He can do it all. He's one of a couple of guys in this draft class, that receiver group, where you plug him in and all of a sudden your offense is just better.
Am I wrong for getting I know it's lofty, but some of the questions we have about him are some of the same questions that I think made Justin Jefferson not a top 20 pick in that draft. He only plays in the slot. He's not, he's quicker than he is fast. And, but again, the good things were the same, right? The polished route running, the short area quickness, the explosiveness after the catch. It's hard for me not to think that if this guy is not the first or second receiver off the board, somebody in the 20s. And again, a lot of those teams that need a receiver, you got the Chargers at 21, you got Baltimore at 22. So many teams, the Giants at 25. Man, if he lasts that long, I feel like he's just so good at everything else that the stuff he didn't do well or needs to work on is not going to matter as much. We could end up with a similar steal there, right?
Well, it's a lofty comp, but as you intimated, and I remember Mark Schofield, when he was with Touchdown Wire, wrote about this, about how Jefferson could be much more than a slot guy. Justin Jefferson coming out, we didn't think of him the way we think of him now. So it is a lofty comp, but it could happen. And when you watch that 2021 tape, man, I don't see a lot that isn't there to make that discussion happen.
Yeah, I mean, for my pick, I'll go with a name we didn't know as much about going into this weekend. But, I mean, the tight end class is deep, but I don't think anybody made themselves more money than Zach Kuntz from Old Dominion, right? 6'7", 255, dominated pretty much every measured event imaginable at the Combine this weekend. Had the second fastest 40-yard dash of the tight ends, and then had the number 1 spot among his position group in the vertical leap, the broad jump, and the 3-cone. I know not everybody ran some of those other drills, but still, he finished first, so I'll take it. But at that size, I mean, even in a deep tight end class, again, we could see 3 or 4 guys go in the first round on that back half of the first round. But Kuntz at that size, that much athleticism, I know he's got some issues in terms of being consistent with the way he catches the ball. But I think he's a willing and able blocker. Obviously, with that frame, can be just an added offensive lineman almost in the ground game. And if he develops that receiving ability down the line, I feel like somebody's got the potential to unlock something really special with a guy that has those types of physical tools.
Well, it's a copycat league, right? Who just won the Super Bowl? Kansas City Chiefs. Who had more 2 and 3 tight end sets than any other team last year? The Kansas City Chiefs. By the way, just to note that he might not be the best former Old Dominion tight end in this draft. That would be Georgia Tech edge rusher Keon White, believe it or not. So there you go.
Yes, that is true. We are big Keon White fans on this show.
Yes, we are. He is a draft crush.
But hey, the Keon White plays defense now, so let's switch to the defensive side of the ball. Which of the defensive prospects that we saw in Indy was most impressive and maybe launched themselves up the board, so to speak, with the performance that he had?
I'm going to go with the guy who I haven't heard a lot about, and people would say he's a third-day pick, and I would look at the tape and go, I think he's better than that. But Michigan cornerback DJ Turner, who I know you knew about, but he's kind of getting on the radar for a lot of people. He impressed me with his tape before the combine to the point where I was wondering, again, why are we, all these, and maybe it's just because there are so many. I have never seen a draft class, Luke, like this, where there are so many cornerbacks 6 feet and over, big guys, rangy guys with really good ball skills and some nice range. I don't remember this happening ever before. So maybe he just gets lost in the sauce. But I think he's going to be talked about a little bit more after a combine in which he posted the best 40-yard dash at 4.26 seconds. And he had the second fastest 10-yard split at 1.47 seconds behind only TCU receiver Darius Davis. Again, when you go back to the tape, what you want to do, you see a big corner who saw a lot of targets in 2022, one more often than not. Last season, he allowed 33 catches on 71 targets for 408 yards, 123 yards after the catch, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 7 pass breakups, and an opponent pass rating of 68.3, which is pretty darn good. Before the combine, I thought he had mid-round potential. Maybe he's a late day 2 guy now. Maybe that's what happens.
Yeah, I think he's got great potential, particularly as a nickel guy in the slot.
Yes.
He's tough. I think he can tackle. He can handle that in there. It's funny what you said about the corner class and the big guys. I feel like the opposite is true of the receiver class. I feel like so many of the top guys in this draft are sub 6 foot, right? They're all smaller guys. It's going to be interesting to see how teams value that. We always think about early receivers. We think about the bigger, taller guys, but so many of the best receiver prospects in this draft are the smaller, shiftier guys. It's going to be interesting to see how teams value that. But I'm going to take a bit of a bigger name here. Nolan Smith came into his collegiate career, obviously with a ton of fanfare, one of the top recruits, if not the top recruit in the country, depending on what service you used. But obviously last year was a big disappointment. He has the torn pectoral injury early in the season, but did not stray far, right? Got really involved with the coaches and was like, hey, how can I help? Stayed very close and connected to that team that ended up winning the national championship for the second year in a row. But we knew what kind of athlete he was, and we were hoping he would be able to show that off at the combine, and he absolutely did, right? I mean, 4.39 40-yard dash at nearly 240 pounds. I mean, the jumps, everything he did just kind of reminded us what a special player, what a special athlete he can be. I know he's still going to be on the undersized side for a lot of teams, but man, the explosiveness, the potential is just through the roof with this guy. And I feel like he's back into that where he would have been if he had played all year, because people kind of reminded of how good he can be. I feel like top 20, maybe even top 15 shouldn't be out of the question for Nolan Smith.
An interesting thing about Nolan Smith and Anthony Richardson also, who just blew up the combine, they did their 40s on a track that made a lot of fast guys look slow, which I find interesting. So, they're going to stand on that, probably not run out their pro days, but yeah, Smith really impressed me. And he was kind of a coach on the field, and he's that, if you want a big, like a 270-pound guy in a 4-man front, that's not really who he is, but the league is going to more 5-man base fronts. Look at what the Eagles did with Hassan Reddick. I think Nolan Smith can fit that role right away.
Well, with that athleticism, you can drop him too. I mean, he has range of a guy that you wouldn't play on the edge anyway. So I feel like he can do so much. Let's move to the other side of the conversation. This is never as fun, right? Because we don't ever want to pile on guys that didn't have a great day. But going into the combine, we had high expectations for some of these prospects, and they didn't live up to them. Who is your pick on offense for the guy who maybe underwhelmed a bit with the way he performed at the combine?
I'll go with Houston receiver and Senior Bowl superstar Nathaniel Tank Dell. He didn't blow the receiver drills or anything. I mean, he looked at fast and shifty. He looked in the receiver drills, actually catching the ball, looked like everything you'd expect, what you saw on tape, what you saw at the Senior Bowl. So,
right.
The problem is when you're his size, 5'8" and 3/8 and 165 pounds, you better bring up the track on the 40, and he didn't. 4.49 is nothing to write home about because, Lucas, I like to say you can be small in the NFL and you can be slow in the NFL, but you cannot be both small and slow in the NFL. Not that he is, but that 40 is a problem. The question is, what does it mean in the grand scheme of things? Does it matter? I should know that his 10-yard split of 1.49 seconds was the third fastest among all receivers, and that's really more where his game is at the next level. He's creating separation with quickness, say 5 to 15 yards, and, that's great. If he can go full road runner at his pro day, awesome. If not, again, it's a problem because when at that size, NFL teams are looking more to convince themselves. They're trying to talk themselves out of you. If he runs a 4.25 40, it's like, oh, well, we have to take. I don't know what we're going to do with him, but the guy's just a freak. We have to take him in the third round. That 40 time, that's what it really nothing to do with what he does on the field because he looks great on the field. But at that point, you're not even talking about the athletic aspect of it. You're third day of the draft, you need a receiver or a satellite guy, one of those Chiefs types that everyone wants now. Yep. And you're thinking, well, okay, he checks this many boxes, but the one he doesn't check might have a team going, yeah, pass, I can't do it.
Well, that's the thing. Those thresholds are always relative to one another, right? If you don't check these two boxes, you have to check these other two to a degree that it overcomes that, right? And I feel like when you have a guy who's that small, you've just got to be stupid fast to make up for it, right? You've got to give the team something of a trump card to be able to say, I know he's under our thresholds in all these other areas, but it's too much speed to pass up. And like you said, I just don't think he gave them enough. And I'm going to stay with the wide receivers for my pick. I think after the season that we saw from Kayshon Boutte at LSU, very underwhelming performance on the field. And I think we were all hoping that at the combine, he would kind of bounce back from that and kind of remind us that he can be an elite wide receiver and keep himself in that kind of day two conversation, maybe even second round with a good showing. But again, a guy that's just he's not big enough to be as slow and unathletic comparatively. Again, those times for regular humans are pretty fast still, but compared to the rest of this class, there's so many other bigger, more physical, more complete wide receivers that are also faster and more athletic that I feel like the numbers he turned in were really disappointing and will just drop him back in a very deep class. I mean, I feel like every year we've got so many good receivers coming out that if you show up and you're sub 6 foot and sub 200 and you run slower and look less explosive than guys that are 6'3", 6'4", and 200 plus, it's going to kick you down to that day three range, especially after the season you just had. And he was, eventually at one point he was going to go back to LSU. Then he switched up and said he was going to declare. I don't know what to do with him in terms of his draft stock right now after what he did in Indy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say off-field stuff because it implies character, and I don't know that. But there were some like weird things. Like I said, you can be small, you can be slow, you can't be both. At that point, as Jerry Glanville once said, the NFL stands for not for long.
Yep, that's true. Hey, let's wrap it up on the defensive side of the ball. Who is the player that going into this week you had high hopes for, high expectations, but just didn't quite meet them?
Georgia cornerback Khalil Ringo's tape is exciting but frustrating. It's like Ringo and Will Levis are the two guys.
So many times he's a roller coaster on tape this year, man.
With him and Levis, the tape is like I have absolutely no idea what's about to happen, which is fun but not. He's got a lot on the ball in a physical sense. He is an amazing man corner. I mean, when he's pressing you, you're done. But in zone, wow, lost. He struggles in transition with quicker receivers. That might not be better at the NFL level without a lot of coaching. His arm measurements are 34 1/4 inches. The hand measurement, 8 3/4 inches. They don't set him apart. Ringo ran fast enough with a 4.36 40, but the other drills, especially the positional movement drills, did nothing to dissuade me from the idea that he's got a lot of work ahead of him if he wants to be regarded as a first-round pick. Now, There are teams that just play a ton of press man. The Patriots have been doing that for years. Maybe the Patriots get him in second round or whatever, and they turn him into what they've turned all their other aggressive man press cornerbacks into from first round to undrafted. Mm-hmm. But if a team falls in love with the athleticism and it's not a schematic fit, I mean, wow, that could be bad.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I went digging for an example for this topic, it was kind of hard to find. I was kind of pleased to see that there weren't a lot of defensive prospects that coming into this week. I was like, oh, this guy's going to blow it up, and he didn't. The one guy I think I wanted to see more from was Andre Carter II, mm-hmm. right? The edge defender from Army.
Yeah.
You love the length. You love the size, the wingspan, the versatility. You saw the production drop in a big way, right? I think he had 11 or 12 sacks last year or the year before, and then came in only had 3.5 this year. But you're hoping, hey, there's a lot of reasons why that could happen. He's going to go to the combine. He's going to show that he's the type of athlete we can develop at the next level. That's not what we saw in Indy at all. We did not see a guy who gave us great times or great jumps or anything like that, and nothing in the positional drills showed it either. That's a guy who, again, in a very deep position group, there's so many edge guys. Every time you and I are doing 3-round mock drafts right now, right? And every time I get to the 3rd round and I've got edge guys on the board that I'm like, how in the world have I not found a spot for these 3 guys and I'm still in the 3rd round?
In my most recent mock, which went up today, I think I had there was a point in the 3rd round where I had 3 or 4 edge guys in a row because I just had to.
Yeah, I ended up with the same thing last week. I went 3 in a row towards the top of the 3rd round because there were so many guys left. Carter, it feels like with this performance, goes to the back of the line, right? I feel like now there's a conversation between him and that next lowest tier as opposed to him being in that same tier with guys like Zach Harrison from Ohio State, obviously Derek Hall from Auburn.
Who I love, by the way.
Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. There's so many guys in that next tier of edge guys that are day 2. I feel like that performance may kick Andre Carter down to the 3rd day, which was just really sad to see.
The thing about Carter, I find interesting, I've watched quite a few games of his, 6'6.5", 256, and I know, you're at West Point, you're training so much. I think the tape shows that he was just a bunch of very long sticks as a body type. I think if you get him up to 270 or 275 at that height, like he almost takes a redshirt year in the NFL. Gets with the strength and conditioning, eats a lot of mashed potatoes or whatever. If he shows up at 275 and he's still got that base quickness and you can throw some technique around it, I don't know that he's disappointing. I think he is tremendously unfinished. I think you have to take that. We talk about Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech as this sort of blank canvas of ridiculous athleticism onto which you can paint whatever you want. I think Andre Carter is kind of a lesser version of that. He just hasn't got the measurables yet that Wilson has because he's out training for the Army. The point is that
absolutely.
It's 2 radically different things as far as how you want to construct your body for this versus that. So I think with Carter, the movement skills are there. The speed is there. I think you tack 20 of the right pounds on that guy, and in a couple of years, I think you have something. But I would agree right now, very unfinished. You just don't know.
Yeah, I think what it tells me right now is that more than being a scheme versatile edge guy, I think he, again, if you just add the weight and the technique, I think he ends up being at worst a very good base 4-3 end. Where he can anchor the edge. He plays the run really well, like you said, with the quickness, and especially being at that height, that's tough sometimes, right? It's tough to get leverage. It's tough to get pad level. He seems to do that really, really well. Again, as long as you're not expecting him to be the athletic type, now that we know that, now that we've tested at that point, maybe it just shifts your perspective and your expectations a little bit. But still think he can be a quality player in the right role at the next level, like you said.
But the way he's built right now, if he has to deal with Trent Williams, no.
It's going to be a long day.
Now, that could be for most people anyone else, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. All right, well, Doug, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much again for joining us, all you fans out there, for another episode of 4 Down Territory. Thanks so much for Doug. Enjoying another combine, man. You made it. You survived. Go take a nap and get some coffee afterwards.
It's my 15th combine, #old.
Hey, you did it, man. Thanks so much for joining us on another episode of 4 Down Territory. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks, everybody.